"A man like you doesn't belong in a place like this." The words were spoken across the lobby of the Ashmore Hotel at 3 in the morning, loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. The night manager had just looked the black man in the faded coat over, head to foot, and then said it straight to his face. 3 minutes later, that same man smiled warmly and handed room keys to a well-dressed couple who had walked in without a reservation. Not one person in that lobby said a word. Not one. What none of them knew was that the man who had just been turned away owned every brick of that building. And inside his coat pocket was something that, in just a few minutes, would bring the entire room to a dead silence. To understand why he was standing there that night and what that something in his pocket was, stay with this story until the very end. If you've ever been treated as though you didn't belong somewhere you had every right to be, then this story is for you. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story like this one each week. Now, let's go back 40 minutes to when Marcus Reed's car pulled over to the curb, right in front of the entrance of the Ashmore Hotel. He didn't shut off the engine right away. He sat there a while, both hands still resting on the wheel, looking up at the front of the building through a windshield speckled with night mist. Warm light spilled down from the arched windows. The stone sign carved with the word Ashmore above the entrance had been cleaned, repaired, polished until it looked brand new. But he knew it wasn't new. This building had stood on this corner for more than 70 years, and he knew it better than anyone he was about to meet that night. The clock on the dashboard ticked over to 2:41 a.m. Marcus had driven nearly 5 hours straight from the city on the other side of the state. He could have flown. He could have called ahead, alerted management, let them roll out the red carpet for the new owner. But he didn't. He never did. Because there was something his father had taught him that he never forgot. He reached down, opened the glove compartment, and felt around inside. His fingers touched something thin and hard, wrapped in a strip of worn felt cloth. He drew it out, set it on his lap, unfolded the cloth. Inside was an old employee ID badge. The photo had yellowed. The plastic lamination was cracked diagonally at one corner. The face in the picture belonged to a black man in his early 50s, hair already going gray, eyes tired but level and upright, dressed in a Navy security uniform. Below it ran a line of faded print. Samuel Reed, Night Security, Ashmore Hotel. Marcus held the badge in his hand for a long time. He said nothing. He just looked at his father's face under the streetlight that fell into the car. His father had stood guard in that lobby for 22 years. 22 years going to work while everyone else went to sleep. 22 years coming home while everyone else woke up. Marcus still remembered the smell of his father every early morning when he came back, the smell of cold coffee and the chill of the night air clinging to the fabric of his uniform. Remembered the way his father would sit down at the kitchen table, silent for a while, before he could become himself again. Back then, Marcus was small and didn't understand what that silence was. Now he understood. He turned the badge over. There, his father had written a small line by hand in ballpoint pen, the ink faded but still legible. A sentence his father had said to him more times than he could count, in the cramped kitchen, under the dim yellow light, when his son wasn't yet old enough to fully understand it. The way a place treats the people it thinks don't matter tells you everything you need to know about it, not the people it's trying to impress. The people it thinks it can afford to ignore. Marcus read the line one more time. Then he wrapped the badge back in the felt cloth, but he didn't put it back in the glove compartment. This time he slid it into the coat pocket over his left chest, close to his heart. Tonight he would carry it with him. He shut off the engine. The sound of the motor died away, leaving the thick silence of a street in the dead of night. Marcus sat a few more seconds, looking into the warm yellow glow behind the lobby glass. 3 weeks earlier, he had finished signing the papers. The Ashmore was his now. All of it. Not through an investment fund, not a small stake, but sole owner, in his name alone. It had taken nearly 15 years of building from nothing, scraping together every dollar, walking through more rejections than he could remember, to reach the day he could put his pen down and buy back this exact place. This exact place. Not any other hotel. Tomorrow, the Ashmore would reopen after its renovation, with a new owner's name and a small reopening ceremony. There would be flowers. There would be a few speeches. There would be people in suits standing and smiling on the marble floor his father had once knelt to clean. But tonight was different. Tonight no one knew he was coming. And that was exactly what he wanted. because his father had taught him that the only way to truly see a place is to walk into it when no one is performing for the boss. To walk in as a man with nothing, as the kind of man the place thinks it can afford to ignore. Marcus opened the car door. The cold night air rushed in, carrying the smell of coming rain. He pulled his collar up, the faded coat he always wore on trips like this. No watch, no leather briefcase, nothing on him to announce who he was. He crossed the curb, up the 3 stone steps. The steps his father's feet had walked up and down thousands of times. Ahead, through the glass, he could see the dark wood reception counter, the warm light, and the shape of a person in uniform standing behind it, bent over a screen. Marcus paused for a beat in front of the revolving door. He raised his hand and laid his right palm against the brass push bar, worn smooth and shining. And he pushed through and stepped inside. The man behind the counter looked up at the faint creak of the revolving door. He was a white man in his late 50s, hair neatly cut, both temples already going gray. The hotel uniform was pressed to a crisp edge on him, collar buttoned, the brass name tag set squarely on his left chest. Hollis. That was what the name tag read. Night manager. He looked at Marcus, and Marcus saw it. That moment. The moment he had seen hundreds of times in his life, so many that he could recognize it before it had even fully formed on a person's face. Hollis's eyes slid down over the faded coat, slid past the unpolished shoes, slid back up to his face. Then something in his expression shifted, not openly, not rudely. Just a quiet recalibration, the way a person's face changes when their eyes have just delivered a piece of information their brain had already processed in advance. Hollis did not greet him. Marcus stepped up to the counter. He walked slowly, unhurried, and stopped at a polite distance. "Good evening," Marcus said. His voice was level. "I need a room for tonight, just one person. Anything will do, nothing special." Hollis didn't answer right away. He let his eyes linger on the screen a moment longer than necessary. Then he looked up, and when he spoke, he leaned forward slightly, just enough, and lowered his voice to the register people use when they want a remark to sound discreet while still making sure those around can hear it. "A man like you doesn't belong in a place like this." The words dropped into the space between the two men with a weight all their own. No shouting, no aggression, just calm and certain, the way people say a thing when they want the humiliation to feel like a matter of course, rather than something personal. At the bar at the far end of the lobby, a woman nursing a late-night drink glanced over. Marcus did not turn his head toward her. He kept his eyes on Hollis. "I'm asking to rent a room," he said. "That's all." Hollis straightened back up. He tapped a few keys on the keyboard, then shook his head with a rehearsed look of regret. "I'm sorry. We're fully booked tonight. No availability." Marcus didn't react. He simply asked again, his voice still even. "Nothing at all? I'm not looking for a suite. A standard room is fine. I just need somewhere to sleep for the night. Fully booked, sir." Hollis repeated it with the smooth patience of a man who had read this exact line many times. "I apologize for the inconvenience. There are a few more affordable inns nearby that might suit you better. If you'd like, I can call you a car to take you there. Suit you better." Marcus heard those 3 words clearly. He stood at the counter, saying nothing for a beat. He looked at Hollis's face, not with anger, but with the careful attention of a man committing to memory exactly what he was seeing. And then, less than 3 minutes later, the revolving door behind him turned softly. A couple stepped in. The man wore a blazer. The woman was draped in a fur coat worth more than most people's monthly rent. They walked with the air of people who simply assumed rooms were always ready for them, because in their experience, rooms always were. Hollis's entire posture changed. His shoulders lifted. The smile came fast and radiant. His whole self seemed to brighten. "Welcome to the Ashmore," Hollis said, his voice flooded with warmth. "Do you have a reservation with us this evening?" The couple had no reservation. They were walk-ins too, exactly like Marcus. But within 4 minutes, Hollis had confirmed a room, swiped a card, and handed over 2 key cards with a warmth that spilled across the whole counter. Marcus watched every second of it. He said nothing. He didn't need to. The message had been delivered without a single word, and both men in the exchange understood it completely, even if only one of them was willing to admit it. The couple headed toward the elevators, their soft laughter fading into the lobby. Hollis followed them with his eyes, the smile still lingering on his lips. Then that smile died as his gaze came back and landed on Marcus, still standing there, still not gone. Something in Hollis's expression hardened. The irritation of a man watching a problem that should have made itself disappear, but refused to. "You're still here," Hollis said. It was no longer a question. Marcus raised his right hand and laid the palm on the dark wood of the reception counter. Gently, he looked down at his own hand on the wood worn to a shine, the wood his father had polished every night until it gleamed like this. Then he looked up at Hollis. "You said I don't belong in a place like this," Marcus said, his voice still as the surface of very still water. "I want you to say it again. Look me in the eye and say it again." Hollis blinked. For an instant, something flickered behind his expression, not remorse, but something closer to confusion, the vague sense of a man who has just realized he might be standing in the wrong place without yet understanding why. But then he pushed it away. The way people always push away the things that make them uncomfortable. He drew in a breath, getting ready to speak. His mouth opened. But those words never left Hollis's mouth, because in that very moment, something else had pulled Marcus elsewhere. Not out of the lobby, but out of tonight, out of this year. His hand was still resting on the dark wood of the counter, and that touch itself, the cool, smooth feel of the wood beneath his palm, had opened a door inside him he thought he had closed long ago. Because he had stood in this exact lobby before, 19 years ago, when he was 21. He had come to pick his father up at the end of a shift. His car had broken down. His father had no way to get home, so Marcus had taken 2 buses in the middle of the night to get here. He remembered tucking himself into a corner near the door, not daring to sit down in one of the lobby chairs, because even then, the young man in him understood that there were chairs that weren't meant for people like him, and he had watched it happen. From beginning to end, his father, Samuel Reed, 63 years old, 22 years with this place, called out into the middle of the lobby in front of everyone. A wealthy guest had reported a missing watch, and instead of checking the cameras, instead of investigating, they looked around the lobby and their eyes settled on the easiest person to blame, the person standing in the lowest position, the person they figured no one would step up to defend, the Black Knight Guard. Marcus stood in the corner, both hands clenched, watching them search his father's pockets right there in the middle of the lobby. Watching the manager back then, a face whose name he had now forgotten but whose bearing he would never forget, order his father to open his personal locker. Watching his father comply, without resistance, without raising his voice, with the quiet dignity of a man too long accustomed to being suspected for nothing more than the color of his skin. They found nothing. Of course they didn't, because his father hadn't taken it. The watch was found 2 days later, wedged behind a seat cushion in that very guest's room. But 2 days later was already too late. They hadn't waited for proof. They fired his father that night. Not a word of apology. Not a single correction afterward. 22 years of service wiped clean in 10 minutes over a suspicion they found more convenient than the truth. Marcus remembered the moment his father took the employee badge from around his collar. He didn't throw it. He didn't make a scene. He just set it down on the dark wood counter, this exact counter, with a hand that trembled faintly, a hand he fought to keep steady. Then he took out his wallet, checked it, the habit of a man too poor not to check. Inside there was exactly $14. That was all the cash his father had on him the night he was thrown out of the place he had given nearly a third of his life to protect. He turned and looked at Marcus, and the thing that hurt Marcus the most, even now, was not the anger on his father's face. It was that there was no anger at all. Only a deep, deep exhaustion. The look of a man who had long known how this world worked, and who was only sad that his son had to see it with his own eyes. On the way home that night, on the last bus, all but empty, his father sat in silence a long while. Then he said, not looking at Marcus, his eyes turned toward the black glass of the window, "The way a place treats the people it thinks don't matter, son, tells you everything you need to know about it." He had said that line to Marcus so many times before, but that night was the first time Marcus truly understood what it meant. His father never worked hotel security again. He took a job in a warehouse, then his health slowly failed. 4 years later, he passed away, having never received so much as a single word of apology from the place that had thrown him away like a broken thing. But there was one thing his father didn't know. The night he was fired, when the two of them sat on that bus, Marcus had quietly made a promise to himself. a promise it would take him 19 years to be able to keep. He would buy this place back, not for revenge, but to turn it into a place where no other father would ever have to walk out the door with $14 in his pocket and a trembling hand setting a badge down on the counter. And now here he was, the same wood counter, the same kind of warm light, the same line, "A man like you doesn't belong in a place like this," except this time it was aimed at him instead of his father. 19 years. Everything had changed, and nothing had changed at all. Marcus blinked, and the present lobby rushed back in around him. The faint jazz from the bar. The light. Hollis's face right in front of him, still waiting, his mouth still half open around the words he had been about to say. Marcus's hand, resting on the counter, slowly closed into a fist. "I've given you some time," Hollis said, finally finding his voice again. "And I want to be straight with you. This is a private establishment. We've explained that we can't accommodate you tonight. You continuing to stand around in the lobby after being informed of that is something we're not going to allow." Marcus lifted his hand off the counter. He looked at Hollis. "I'm standing in a hotel lobby," he said. "I'm not raising my voice. I'm not causing a disturbance. I'm not doing a single thing that gives you grounds to throw me out." "I'm not asking your permission," Hollis replied. Something in the lobby shifted. The woman at the bar set down her glass. In the far corner, a member of the night cleaning crew stopped wiping and looked up. Hollis reached under the counter, lifted the house phone, and pressed a number. He said a few short words, set the phone down. "I've called security," he said, and this time there was something almost satisfied in his voice. "They'll help you find your way out." From the hallway leading to the back offices, 2 men in security uniforms stepped out. The one in front was young, large, with the walk of a man who did this regularly. The one behind him was different. He was much older, past 60, perhaps. White hair, back slightly stooped, the slow gait of a man who had stood guard through too many nights in his life. The Navy security uniform he wore was almost identical to the one in the photo tucked inside Marcus's coat pocket. Marcus looked at him, and something in his chest stirred faintly. The 2 security men approached and positioned themselves on either side of Marcus, falling into the familiar geometry of a maneuver they had performed many times. The younger one stood closer, ready. The older one hung back a little, and Marcus realized the man wasn't looking at the coat, wasn't looking at the shoes, wasn't looking at him the way Hollis had looked at him. He was looking at his face, and he stopped short. Something passed across the old guard's face. His brows drew together faintly. His head tilted slightly, like a man trying to dredge up a name, a face, something from very long ago that had only just brushed the edge of memory. His mouth opened as if to say something, then closed again. He hadn't yet named the thing he was seeing, but he had seen it. "Sir," the young security man said to Marcus, his voice not hostile but firm, "please come with us to the door." Marcus didn't move. He looked around the lobby. The woman at the bar was looking straight at him now. The cleaner stood frozen by the wall, the rag still in his hand. Somewhere up on the mezzanine, a guest had paused at the railing, looking down. A few phones had appeared, not held high, not flaunted, just quietly angled toward him, recording the precise shape of this moment. A black man in an old coat, between 2 security guards, and a manager who had already decided how this ended. And this was the moment something inside Marcus sank. Not fear. He wasn't afraid. He was the owner of this building. With a single word, a single phone call, he could turn this entire lobby on its head within 5 minutes. But that wasn't the thing holding him back. It was a question that had just flared up in his mind, cold and sharp. What did I come here for? He had told himself he bought the Ashmore back to restore his father's dignity, to turn it into a decent place. But standing here, in the middle of this lobby, under these stairs, he was suddenly struck by a bitter truth. His father would never see the reopening. His father had been in the ground for 19 years. Whether or not he revealed who he was tonight, whether or not he fired Hollis, whether or not he hung his own name on the sign out front, none of it could reach the man who had died without a single person ever saying sorry to him. "I'm doing all of this. For what? For whom?" A vast exhaustion came crashing down over him, the same exhaustion he used to see on his father's face every early morning at the kitchen table. Maybe his father had been right. Maybe places like this never change. Maybe he was just buying an old building and telling himself a beautiful story to cover over a wound that would never heal. Maybe he shouldn't say anything at all. Maybe he should just turn around, walk out that door, drive home, and let them quietly replace Hollis tomorrow with a cold internal memo. No one needed to know. No one needed to hear the story of a night guard who had died long ago. Let his father rest. Let the whole thing fade away. Marcus turned his head toward the door. He shifted one foot. His shoulders had already begun to angle his body toward the way out. The young security man saw this and eased back slightly, thinking it was over. And in that quiet moment, when Marcus had all but let go, had all but allowed his father to slip into oblivion one more time, a sound rang out across the lobby. From inside his coat pocket, a voice. Not loud, but in that lobby falling into silence, it rang out clear, threading through the jazz, reaching every person standing there. The phone in Marcus's coat pocket had lit up when he turned. An accidental brush of the coat's hem, an accidental press of a button, and an old recording he had kept for all these years began to play. The voice of an older man, rough, warm, slow. A voice Marcus had not heard with his own ears in 19 years. The way a place treats the people it thinks don't matter tells you everything you need to know about it. Marcus went still. He had forgotten it was still in his phone, a recording he had taken in secret one evening years ago, when his father sat at the kitchen table recounting the old nights on guard, back when Marcus didn't yet know that the day would come when that voice would be all he had left of his father. He had listened to it more times than he could count, through the hardest nights of his life. He had forgotten that tonight. It was still there, just a touch away. The whole lobby went quiet. The woman at the bar stopped breathing. The cleaner let the rag fall. Hollis frowned, not understanding what was happening, his eyes darting from Marcus to the phone playing that strange, unfamiliar voice. But there was one person who did not frown. The old guard. He had been standing still all this time, a step back behind the young security man. But when that voice rang out, his whole body went rigid. His eyes opened wide. His hand, hanging at his side, slowly clenched, then trembled open again. He knew that voice. He had heard it before, thousands of times, through long nights standing guard together, through brief breaks with a cup of cold coffee in the staff room out back. He had heard the man who owned that voice say this exact line, in this exact slow way, more times than he could count. "Samuel," he whispered. The name fell from his mouth almost without sound. But Marcus heard it, and he turned sharply to look at the old guard. The old man looked at him, truly looked at him this time, looked into his eyes, at the line of his jaw, at the something in his face he had been straining to place all this while without being able to name it. And now, with that voice still hanging in the air, everything fit together before his eyes. "My God," he said, his voice breaking. "You're Sam's boy. You're Samuel Reed's son." The old guard's eyes brimmed with tears. He stepped back out of the escort formation, as if simply standing there had become something he could not bear for a single second longer. "I worked with your father," he said, no longer speaking to Marcus now, but almost to himself, to the whole room. 14 years. I stood guard with that man for 14 years in this lobby. Sam was the kindest man I ever met in my life. He never took a cent from anyone." His voice shook. "The night they fired him, I was standing right over there, and I didn't say a word. I was afraid of losing my job. I stood there in silence and watched them push my friend out the door. No one in the lobby moved." Hollis went pale. He was beginning to understand, though not yet fully, that there was something here far larger than a guest who'd been turned away from a room. Marcus stood in the middle of the lobby, between two security guards who no longer dared to touch him, beneath the stairs and the phones, with his father's voice just gone silent in his pocket, and the exhaustion that had been about to pull him toward the door a moment ago, the thought of giving up, of letting his father slip into oblivion one more time, dissolved. Because his father had never truly left. His father was still here, in that voice, in the old guard standing there weeping. In every brick of this place, his father had watched over for 22 years. Marcus straightened his back. He raised his hand to his left chest, to the coat pocket where a thin object wrapped in worn felt cloth lay close to his heart. His fingers slipped inside, touching the familiar cloth, and he began to draw it out. He placed it on the counter. The old employee badge, wrapped in a layer of frayed felt cloth. Marcus opened the layer of cloth, slowly, then pushed the badge sliding on the dark wood surface toward Hollis. The exact counter surface that 19 years ago, his father had placed down an identical badge with a trembling hand. The yellow light shone down on the faded photo. The face of a black man with graying hair in a navy blue uniform. The faded text below, Samuel Reed, Night Guard, Ashmore Hotel. Hollis looked down at the badge, then looked up at Marcus, then looked down again. Something on his face began to crack. 22 years, Marcus said. His voice was not loud. He did not need to be loud, because the whole lobby had quieted to the point of being able to hear even the ventilation fan. My father stood guard in this lobby for 22 years. He wiped the counter surface that you were standing behind over there. He polished it every night until it shone like it does now. He knew the name of every cleaner, every doorman, every late shift waiter, while the people sitting in the suite rooms did not even bother to look at his face. Marcus stopped for a beat. Then one night, someone lost a watch. They did not look at the cameras. They did not investigate. They just looked around the lobby and chose the person easiest to blame, the black man standing in the lowest position. They searched my father's pockets right in the middle of this lobby, in front of everyone. They chased him away that night. In his wallet remained exactly $14. The old security guard turned his face away, his shoulders trembling. 2 days later, they found the watch stuck behind the seat cushion in that guest's room, Marcus continued. But no one called my father. No one apologized. 22 years of service were wiped clean in 10 minutes because of a suspicion that people found more convenient than the truth. My father never worked as a security guard again. 4 years later, he died, still never having received an apology. Marcus looked straight into Hollis's eyes. You said I do not belong here. You know what? You are half right. Tonight, I did not come here as a guest. I bought the Ashmore 3 weeks ago. The entirety, under my name alone. I am the owner of this building, of the counter you are leaning on, of the uniform you are wearing, of the name tag on your chest. Hollis stepped back half a step. His hand gripped the edge of the counter. But I did not buy it to have one more hotel, Marcus said. I already have many hotels. I bought exactly this place, exactly this lobby, because 22 years ago my father preserved it like preserving something sacred, and then it threw him away like throwing away a broken item. I bought it so that what happened to my father never happens to anyone else stepping through that door again. He turned to look around the lobby, past the woman at the bar, past the cleaner, past the phones pointing at him. And tonight, right in the first week I owned this place, I stepped in with an old jacket, and that happened again, to myself. On this exact floor. Hollis opened his mouth. Sir, I had no way of knowing you were. That is exactly the problem, Marcus cut in, his voice still chillingly calm. You did not know who I was. You just took one look at me and decided I did not deserve to be treated decently. Not because of anything I said, not because of anything I did, but because of what I looked like when stepping through that door. You did not refuse a boss. You refused someone you thought had no power, and that is your true self when you think no one is noticing. Marcus placed his hand on his father's badge on the counter, pulling it lightly back toward himself. You are fired as of this moment. Hollis stood frozen. His face turned gray, blank. He looked down at the name tag on his chest, then looked up at Marcus, then looked at the old security guard who was turning his face away. Every excuse he intended to make seemingly vanished from his head at the same time. He raised his hand, by reflex, intending to adjust his uniform collar, the small automatic gesture of a person trying to hold on to the last remaining shred of dignity. Then Marcus turned to the old security guard. The old man was still standing there, tears rolling down his wrinkle-lined face, not bothering to wipe them away. Marcus stepped closer to him, and his voice softened significantly, no longer having any chilling sharpness. You stood guard with my father for 14 years, Marcus said. You remember him. Tonight, upon hearing his voice, you were the first person in this room to call his name out. In 19 years, you are the first person. The old security guard looked up at him, his lips trembling. I kept silent that night, he said. I apologize. I was cowardly. You were afraid of losing your job, Marcus said. I understand. That is the fault of those who put you in the position of having to choose between your livelihood and your conscience. Not your fault. He placed a hand on the old man's shoulder. "You are still here after all these years. You still remember him. To me, that means more than you think. Starting from tomorrow, you do not stand guard at the door anymore. I need a person in charge of training on how this place treats people, all people. And I do not think anyone in this building understands that better than you." The old security guard looked at him, his mouth moving but not uttering a word. He just nodded, a trembling nod, then raised his hands to cover his face. Hollis, from behind the counter, finally found his voice again. He stepped up half a step. "Mr. Reed, please. I have worked here for 9 years. I have a family. I know you have a family," Marcus said, "and I do not say this lightly. But tonight you did not make a small mistake. You looked at a human being and decided he was not worthy before he had time to say a word. You did that with the comfort of someone who has done it many times. I cannot let such a person stand at the first door that my guests meet." He stopped. "But I will not let you leave empty-handed in the middle of the night. You will be paid full salary until the end of the month and a severance allowance. Enough for you to have time to find another place. That is what my father did not receive. I will not become the place that treated him like that." Hollis looked at him for a long time. Then he bowed his head, nodded slightly. He took off the brass name tag from his shirt chest, placed it down on the counter, next to the place where Marcus's father's badge had just lain. 2 badges, 2 fates, on the same wood surface. Then he turned his back, walking toward the back office area, not saying another word. The hotel lobby gradually returned to its small sounds. The sound of jazz music, the sound of the ventilation fan. The woman at the bar silently placed her hand on her chest. The night shift cleaner bent down to pick up the wiping cloth again, but his eyes were still red. Marcus picked his father's badge up from the counter, wrapped it again in the layer of felt cloth, and placed it back in his left chest shirt pocket. And this is what no one in the lobby that night knew. Marcus Reed did not need the Ashmore. He already owned 17 other hotels, much bigger, newer, and more profitable. The Ashmore was an old building, with high renovation costs, located in an area no longer fashionable. Based on all the numbers, it was a bad deal. His financial team had advised him not to buy. They did not understand why he insisted. They did not know that 19 years ago, a 21-year-old young man had sat on the last bus next to a father who had just been humiliated and had promised himself one thing in the dark: that one day he would return, not to burn it down, but to turn it into what his father always believed it should become. His father never saw that day. Samuel Reed died 19 years ago, not knowing at all what his son would do. He passed away, still thinking he was just a forgotten night guard, thrown away by the place he had spent nearly a third of his life to preserve. Marcus bought the Ashmore not for the whole world to know his father's name, but so that he himself could stand in the place where his father once bowed his head and make it decent. That was the apology his father never received, spoken in the only way Marcus still could speak. 3 months later, on a peaceful Tuesday afternoon, Marcus returned to the Ashmore. This time he wore a neat jacket. This time people knew he was coming. But he did not come to attend any ceremony. He just wanted to stand in the corner of the lobby for a while and look. The old security guard, now wearing casual clothes instead of a uniform, was standing next to the reception counter, guiding a young employee. Marcus vaguely heard him say to the boy, "You look at people entering the door. You do not look at the clothes they wear. You look into their eyes. Every person stepping through that door brings with them a story that you do not know. Your job is to treat them decently before they have time to prove anything. Before, not after." Marcus smiled slightly. He looked up at the wall behind the reception counter. There, under a small light, was a glass frame. Inside the frame was an old employee badge. The photo had turned yellow. The plastic lamination cracked a diagonal line at the corner. Samuel Reed, Night Guard, Ashmore Hotel. Below the frame, on a small brass plaque, was the sentence that his father once handwrote on the back of the badge, now re-engraved so that every employee entering their shift would read it. "The way a place treats someone it thinks is insignificant says everything about that place." 19 years ago, that sentence was the words of a tired father teaching his son how to understand an unjust world. Tonight, it is no longer a warning about injustice. It has become the promise of a place, a reminder every night for every person standing behind that counter. The same sentence: the meaning has changed.
Welcome back to the Ashmore, sir. It is good to be back.
Marcus stood there for another while, looking at the old security guard leading the young employee out to welcome a guest who had just stepped in, an older man wearing a simple outfit, carrying a frayed bag in his hand. The young employee did not glance at the bag. He looked into the guest's eyes and smiled and stepped forward. Marcus raised his hand to touch his left chest shirt pocket, where the second badge, the badge he kept for himself alone, still lay there, close to his heart. His father never knew what this place had become. But standing here, looking at a stranger being welcomed into the door that his father was once pushed out of, Marcus wondered, not for the first time, and perhaps not for the last, how many more people, in how many other places, tonight are still being chased out of the exact place where they were supposed to belong.